It seems like our friends, the Pharisees, take it on the chin again tonight in the Gospel from Jesus. In essence, he's calling them hypocrites. And the term hypocrites comes from the Greek, which means play actors, people who wear masks. And I can't help but think at this time of Halloween, how apropos to hear this reading. I heard someone tell me the other day, actually, that $9.2 billion has been spent this year on Halloween candy, masks, decorations, parties. That's a lot of money for Halloween, isn't it? Anyway, back to the Pharisees. The Pharisees probably felt that they were getting a bad rap. They were trying to do the best that they thought they could, yet somehow Jesus makes note of it, that they're doing everything for the sake of another reason, to be recognized, to be noticed. The Talmud, which is the commentary on the Jewish law, lists 7 types of Pharisees, and I'd like to share them with you tonight. And the reason I want to share them is because if we really listen to them, we probably can hear some familiarity with ourselves in some of these descriptions. First, there is the shoulder Pharisee. He was meticulous in his observance of the law, but he wore his good deeds upon his shoulder. He was out for a reputation for purity and goodness. Yes, he obeyed the law, but he did so in order to be seen by other people. Second, there was the wait a little Pharisee. He was the Pharisee who could always produce an entirely valid excuse for putting off a good deed. He professed the creed of the strictest of Pharisees, but he could always find an excuse for allowing practice to lag behind. He spoke, but he did not do. Third, there is the bruised or the bleeding Pharisee. These Pharisees received their name for this reason. Women had a very low status in Palestine. No strict Orthodox Pharisee would be seen talking to a woman in public, even if that woman were his own wife or sister. These Pharisees went even further. They would not even allow themselves to look at a woman in the street. In order to avoid doing so, they would close their eyes, and so they would bump into walls and buildings and obstructions. They thus bruised themselves and wounded themselves, and their wounds and bruises gained them a special reputation for being exceedingly pious. Fourth, the Pharisee was called the humpbacked or tumbling Pharisee. Such men walked in such ostentatious humility that they were bent over like a hunchback. They were so humble that they could not even lift their feet from the ground, and so tripped over every obstruction they met. Fifth, the ever-reckoning or compounding Pharisee. This kind of Pharisee was forever reckoning up his good deeds. He was forever striking a balance sheet between himself and God, and he believed that every good deed he did put God a little further in his debt. To him, religion was always to be reckoned in terms of a profit and loss account. Sixth, the timid or the fearing Pharisee. He was always in dread of divine punishment. He was always, therefore, cleansing the outside of the cup and the platter, so that he might seem to be good. He saw religion in terms of judgment, and life in terms of terror-stricken evasion of this judgment. Last, it said in the Talmud, is the true God-fearing Pharisee. He was the Pharisee who really and truly loved God, and who found his delight in obedience to the law of God, the commandments, however difficult that it might be. after doing a little reflection on those 7, I came up with a few of my own. Tell me what you think of these. How about the finger-pointing Pharisee? A finger-pointing Pharisee sees and exposes the faults and failings of others while ignoring his or her faults and failings. We all know how easy it is to point the finger at others, because then we're off the hook in a sense. This is one of my favorites. How about the sourpuss Pharisee? In church, always having this dour look, because you can't really be happy in church. You can't smile in church. You always have to be sad looking because, it's serious stuff. God by proxy Pharisee. These are quick to judge and condemn the motives of others, and then readily share their thoughts with other people who might want to gossip about those same people. How about this one? Religion is not my real life, Pharisee, because what they say or do in church has nothing to do with their everyday living. When I was in a parish, I couldn't help but think of the parking lot. After Mass, people running out to get out of that parking lot the first and cutting people off. What did they do in church just 5 seconds before? How about, that's not my problem, Pharisee? Deems the poor, the disadvantaged, and the marginalized as unworthy of their care because handouts don't really help anyone anyway. How about the fair weather Pharisee? When everything's going smoothly, God is great, yea God, I pray all the time. When things aren't going so great, God, who? I'm not going to church, I'm not praying, not helping me. Last but not least, let's have a meeting about that Pharisee. People who are willing to talk about anything, but never translate that talk into action. Jesus condemns the Pharisees because they talk, but they don't walk. They say a lot of things, but they don't put their words into action. My friends, we are challenged tonight to put the faith we profess into practice every day. We're asked to be humble, to accept the fact that we are not God, that we are not better than anyone else, that we need God and we need everyone else. And that is what humility is, truth. A sister, a Benedictine sister by the name of Dolores Duffner, writes songs, and she paints these beautiful pictures as she writes songs. This song, which was entitled The Virtue of Humility, she says, "On virtue's ladder, gospel friend, by climbing downward, we ascend." One more time. On virtue's ladder, gospel friend, by climbing downward, we ascend. Those who humble themselves will be exalted. I heard a great story about a Nobel Peace Prize recipient in 1953. Gets off a plane in Chicago's airport, greeted by a ton of city officials and all the people who wanted to congratulate him. And he happened to see something going on the other side of wherever he was standing, and he just put his finger out to the people and said, "Wait a minute." And this bushy-haired, big-mustached man went over to the other side and saw an elderly African-American woman trying to get onto a bus with 2 huge suitcases. He helped her onto the bus, carrying the suitcases, found her a seat, told her to have a safe trip, and then Albert Schweitzer went back to the group who was welcoming him and said, "Sorry, I couldn't help it." And one of the bystanders said, "Now that's the first time I ever saw a homily walking." Pretty interesting. All of us need to be gospel-based walkers. Not only saying we read the gospel, understand the scriptures, understand the commandments, but living them on a daily basis. Those who humble themselves will, I guarantee you, so does